Welcome to the Gain Momentum podcast, focusing on timeless lessons from senior leaders in hospitality, food service, travel, and technology. We are joined today by Brent Hayhurst, Director of Program Development at Curator Hotel and Resort Collection. Brent, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you, Adam.
And our co-host today is Gain Managing Partner, Michael Cohen. Michael, how are you?
Great, Adam. Great to be back. Brent, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. So, listeners, we focus this podcast around 4 key questions that we ask all guests who come on. So we're going to dive into the first question, which is, Brent, what single piece of advice would you give to vendor companies entering hospitality?
I mean, from our perspective, especially in the world of independent hotels, I think it's really having a defined value proposition, what you're going to bring to the equation, how you're going to work with other systems that are in the play already. We're seeing a lot of great movement in integrations and partnerships, on the vendor side, and that's been, I think, a key in helping to propel technology forward in the hospitality industry.
When you think about that question as an individual, because you have a significant amount of experience, that's why we're all talking together today, not of course to name specific vendors or anything like that or specific, but like what sort of pitfalls have you seen in the past? What sort of things have you said, that's one, maybe we got to, remind that particular company, or maybe it's a teaching moment, even though you're a client side of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to, the core elements of really what services they're trying to provide, and ultimately what problem they're trying to solve for. And so elements of support and response and strategic road mapping of understanding needs and being able to adapt and pivot. Those are all extremely important for really finding kind of a core partner within a vendor for what they can ultimately deliver to you and help to grow and be there for your business.
Just anyone who looks at the Curator website, there's almost an announcement every week that you are partnering with another technology company and bringing them into the Curator fold. That must be busy for you.
Yeah, holidays and weekends optional, right? So, we've been extremely busy. We're just getting ready to celebrate, the 3rd year of Curator. And so really have built this program from the ground up. The majority of the team has been here from the beginning, and we're continuing to, build upon kind of the core value proposition and of what we're trying to address, which is building scale and building opportunity for independence, and ultimately helping the independent segment to really thrive and survive in an ever-growing competitive environment. So every vendor that we add, is serving a purpose and helping to build in a building block approach of the value proposition of Curator, but also allowing us to really kind of be nimble enough to solve for a variety of issues that any prospective member or existing member comes to us that they need help trying to solve for.
I'm wondering if you could color that in terms of specific issues. And Curator, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's described as a owner-driven platform. And
that's right. Yeah, we ultimately, we have great partnerships and work very closely with both owners and operators, depending on the structure of the property and the team involved. As many people may Curator was founded by Pebblebrook Hotel Trust, really as a way to help to continue to solve and elevate some of the things that they were already doing within their core business, kind of leveraging off of their acquisition of LaSalle, overnight becoming the largest independent owner of hotels in the U.S. Taking notes of some of those successes that they had just from some of their internal processes, we were able to build Curator with the support of who we refer to as our founding members, including Davidson Hotel Group, Viceroy, Sage Hospitality, Noble House Hotels and Resorts, and Springboard Hospitality. And so kind of building upon sort of, having that core portfolio to kind of build upon, really helped us to figure out sort of what our true north was going to be and how we were going to continue to solve for a lot of what they were looking to accomplish.
I'm wondering if I could ask one more follow-up here, which is related to this balance between independent hotels that are owner-driven and brand standards, which is a lot of the big chains. How do you navigate that process?
Yeah, so it's kind of one of the key values of Curator. So, no mandates. So what we put together and how we build out our program as a preferred vendor program ultimately is at the pleasure of each member. And so, what makes sense for them, what fits within their business, what they're trying to accomplish with their tech stack. We understand, especially in the independent market, that there needs to be flexibility there. So in some of our categories, we may work with one vendor, we may work with three or more, depending on how we see each value that the vendor brings to the equation, how they can support a different segment of the membership. And so it's really about kind of leveraging and balancing, that mix of opportunity with flexibility.
Brent, we're going to move into our second question here. What are some of the challenges or setbacks you've experienced when rolling out a new business expansion or partnership?
I guess challenges you can address, a lot, for us, a lot of it may be, looking at, kind of managing those expectations, really. So when you're managing expectations, for both the vendor as well as the membership, there's expectations, there's excitement coming in when you're looking to put a new partnership in place. What that looks like from an adoption point is something that the Curator team focuses on really from the beginning and really starting back to the evaluation phase, making sure that our vendors understand kind of where we're coming from, the role we play, how they'll be positioned, how we'll look to help them to get their conversations across and really start to connect with the members. I think that's important to kind of set those expectations so that it's a different model than ultimately kind of what you're used to if you're contracting directly with an operator or with a brand, of an expectation of having of really signing on and having a core committed customer base right from the beginning. It's really about building out what ultimately your solution will help the independent solve for, and how Curator can help to get that messaging across.
So even though we're nice people, it's not always softballs, Brent, just so you know.
Of course.
So here's a little bit of a hardball. And again, please take it how you'd like, and it's with respect. You used to work at a senior level for one of the large global organizations. And there's benefits and there's challenges coming along with being executive with a large global organization. Maybe there's more budget, there's more impact, but there's also more bureaucracy and maybe even more politics. Compare and contrast for your career. I'm curious, in regards to what Adam said, where you were to where you are. How is your day different in regards to these type of innovations or rollouts or service enhancements? What's it like being where you are today versus where you were, which were both amazing positions?
Yeah, I think, ultimately, at the core of it all, it's hospitality. So you're trying to problem solve with a smile. The problems are different for
Right.
sure. Looking at a global scale, trying to solve for, potentially nuances, at one region over another, versus, my current role of Curator, which is really kind of getting back into the kind of where I started from, in career, of really looking at opportunities from a business perspective, and helping to, develop opportunities, from relationship through solution, through vetting, through ultimately execution. I think the big difference that I'm seeing in Curator is that kind of a small versus a large company is that I have more control over that process as far as how a small team can work, and ultimately how we manage and start that process from beginning to end.
So is it more entrepreneurial in some ways, or intrapreneurial, maybe is a better way of putting it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like we mentioned, Curator kind of started from an idea and kind of build upon it as we go. We're continuing to adjust and evolve, as we come across new challenges, And ultimately, as we grow and reach, different members, we're continuing to evolve from that point too, because, the way that we've structured our preferred vendor program is meant to evolve with the membership. Because as we stated, there's not a one size fits all. The needs are going to continue to change. The problems are going to get different. You're encountering, new concepts and ideas every day with how technology is especially emerging and really coming into its own within the hospitality market. And so there is always something new to address and a fresh take on something that needs to be looked at more closely.
It's interesting because a lot of times the independents, they don't really have nearly as big of a voice in the industry versus the big chains. And yet there's so many independent hotels around the world that serve this dire market need, or I don't want to use the word dire. They serve a profound market need where a lot of people want to go with independent hotels. And I'm wondering, on the vendor platform side, that does require a lot of flexibility. How do you go about solving these challenges for them? How because you can easily be divided. Your time can be divided so many different ways, particularly with the hospitality technology landscape as it is. How do you pick and choose these battles and serve hotels that have wildly different tech stacks at the independent level?
Yeah, really one at a time. To be candid, every member, as part of their onboarding, we look to understand who they are, what their problems look like. Each hotel and, ultimately, portfolio of hotels, the way it may be, how they come into the program, is assigned a Curator account manager. That account manager is ultimately like their voice and, the feedback that comes back through me and through Curator leadership as far as, what we're hearing, where we need to go, what we should be looking at next. And that's really important to us. We want each member to have that voice because ultimately, I think that's where Curator is playing an important role in really helping the voice of each of those properties to come together at a higher level for what we can bring to them, to each and every, vendor and opportunity. What we've been able to do and how we're positioning ourselves with a lot of our key vendors isn't merely just, hey, we're gonna introduce you to Hotel A, exchange for, a deeper discount. It's really talking about understanding their strategic roadmap, understanding where they're going, providing them with candid feedback, when we hear it, helping to bridge communication gaps where we see it happening, whether it be an implementation that maybe isn't going as well. Is it a service issue that continues to be sort of a bee's nest, for the hotel team? We can help to elevate that and really be ultimately that higher voice, for the member hotels, which they potentially, didn't have before, or didn't feel like they had before when they were just operating as a sole entity.
And also what's interesting is, you develop frameworks, which is a term that a lot of people in GAIN know that I use 3 times a day. But frameworks so that because hotels are busy, independent hotels are busy, they're servicing their clients, they're growing their business. And sometimes many times they don't have almost like the intellectual capacity. I don't say that, it's not that they're not smart, they just don't have the bandwidth intellectually to be able to understand what is best practice on back of the house versus they have general, of course, they're professionals, they execute beautifully, but from a macro perspective, you have far more information and data that you can translate, right? So one thing that I always find when we, as an organization, work with independent hotels or independent hotel groups, every hotel is a snowflake. People say, oh, we have 300 hotels. That's great. But especially in every hotel is a little bit different, maybe majorly different, and they need to be treated as such. And that's where obviously the gap in the market and yourselves and others like Leading and some other companies have done a really good job of building this opportunity for independent hoteliers to be part of a family and have some consistency on things that aren't mission critical maybe to their day-to-day, but are very mission critical to the ongoing growth or systematic execution of hospitality, which not a lot of the general managers or even owners have time to think about sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's a really important, aspect of how we approach each and every member. We kind of refer to each hotel, each member with our collection. We're very careful. We're extremely proud and careful of how we talk about our numbers, because that's the way that the industry is structured. Numbers are important. 100 hotels speaks larger than 30 hotels, and that's important for what we're trying to accomplish ultimately in growing scale, and how if we can serve new members, we can attract new vendors, and we can continue to provide more leverage and opportunity where we can. And I think from each hotel's perspective, that's where, as we've grown out our program, which consists of over 100 different, vendor master service agreements at this point in the game. Some of those have come because, at the beginning stage, we needed to fill in and solve for a category. We need a PMS, we need a POS, we need to understand who we're going to use for revenue management, how we're going to solve for a booking engine. And then over time, a lot of that has come through somewhat organically as well, as far as how we're partnering and understanding the needs of what Sage as an organization, for example, is trying to address. Or hearing from a GM that, I'm really looking for a better way to engage my guests and make sure they're aware of all of the different activities that we have on property, and how we're trying to support their needs and really enrich their experience. And so, what's a lot of curators day to day, and especially mine in my role, is somewhat, having conversations, continuing to reevaluate products, understanding new positioning, addressing and going through demos of new vendors of all sorts, in order to really make sure that we have that global look as to kind of what is out there, and what may be coming, what's emerging, what's already there and ready, fully baked and ready to solve for any issue that comes up.
Brent, that's almost the perfect lead in to our third question. Talking about scaling past 100 hotels, as well as having 100 MSAs, master service agreements. So, Brent, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for growth in hospitality for 2024 and beyond?
Yes, good question. I think a lot of it is prime for the disruptors. You're seeing that in a lot of what's coming to light, from everything from how you're managing service requests and tickets, to looking at new ways to facilitate booking and cut out some of the nuances of the process. I think also guest engagement is going to continue to be huge, especially for the independents. The independents, as far as the way that guest engagement is really measured, the brands, don't have, a large loyalty program, which ultimately drives a lot of the marketing and the collaboration as to how they kind of fall within that portfolio and service and attract their guests. And so looking for ways that and solutions that are nimble enough to really care for what it might mean for a guest who's coming on property, and maybe just a one-time guest, or how you turn that one-time guest through that experience into a repeat client, or help to facilitate and sort of a cross-promotional approach between one hotel in a market or a completely different market that are affiliated through Curator, or ultimately the management company or a portfolio of brand.
So it's interesting because the challenge, your type of organization has, is that in many ways you're middling, and I don't say that's a negative. It's where you are. You're a middling organization because you're not 3 hotels with a very vibrant owner who's willing to take risks, and you're not part of a 2,000 or 3,000 hotel portfolio company where it's literally a government, and it has to go through subcommittees. And I'm exaggerating, of course.
Yeah,
That's a really, I wouldn't say like it's a gray area, but I say it's somewhat uncharted, because there are not a lot of standards or a lot of history. Of course, there's other organizations over the years that have done things somewhat similar, very successfully, but it's still in flux, is what I feel like when I think about your type of organizations. There's a lot of movement and flux, because there's all those inputs coming from different parts of the industry, and you guys are a hub filtering, managing, directing, perhaps advising, etc. So you never have a boring day, I can imagine.
No, and I would say that that term middling is an interesting way to kind of look at it. And on some days, I'm sure we have stakeholders that would call that that tends more into meddling. But it's where we are in that position where, in some ways, we insert ourselves. Sometimes we're invited in to help, as a core member to try to solve that problem. But ultimately, our goal is to make sure that everything is working as smoothly as possible, kind of given, that looking at that core value of that you need to position that staff at property who we know is already overworked, understaffed, managing, their own day to day. Their goal is to service that guest and whatever that guest needs. And we want to be kind of on the back end, just making sure that they have what they need, that we're helping to support, the back end, the core infrastructure of what they're doing, and that we can be a resource for them when they are looking for something new, something different, or really just need to try to break through a roadblock that they're facing, from just to get them through their day to day.
I want to circle back to this whole idea of loyalty, because that is rife for gains within hospitality. And I'm wondering, from a technology perspective, what can hotels do to improve their loyalty?
Yeah, I think there is it's an interesting balance in my perspective of technology and still service, because a lot of hotels, for purposes of sort of the core aspect of what they're trying to build and the experience, you're focused on mobile kiosks, you're getting rid of your desk, there's a staffing component to that, and also how you're looking to structure your business. That doesn't work for every property. There are still properties within our portfolio that service their customers on a very high touch. And so how technology can solve for that kind of variety of problem where you can, based on your location, you're going to have a rush of people that all get in and are ready to check in at 5:00. And that kiosk can really help to resolve some of those friction points that someone's going to get from standing in line and really starting their stay. And that has an impact, with our human behavior, is how we're going to view that room. If I'm frustrated at the front desk, I could get to a room and I'm going to be frustrated with that room, or I'm going to find something wrong with that room that I may not have found before had I been able to, kind of walk in and had a kind of a refreshing state of mind of, here I am and I'm ready to get going. And so trying to balance that service and that technology is really something that each of our hotel partners are working on day in and day out, and are making great headway in figuring out what works and what makes the most sense for them.
So what's interesting is, in your career, from what I understand, you had a major focus on digital marketing, demand gen, etc., with Hilton perhaps. And that was about getting heads in beds. Your job was to help feed the machine that got heads in beds. And now it sounds like, and obviously because I know who you are and we know who you are and we have some idea who we're talking to, you have a wider mandate now. How do you think you've changed in your thought processes? What have you used from your telecommunications background in the past that you think has been interesting or applicable to the hospitality industry? Just more about you, Brent, for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting, kind of career progression for me. Ultimately, I kind of say that I've always been in business development. I started my career in energy and was kind of doing more client support and working with one of the largest aluminum, smelter, and provider in the U.S. to help, lifelong engineers, manage their electricity and natural gas spend. And that's like sort of coming in there, someone out of college and, telling the seasoned professional how we think, you could change stuff in order to, save money on your energy. And that, that kind of built into, helping to drive sales opportunities through telecommunications. And ultimately, it was about serving the customer and understanding the stakeholders and the role that I was playing in that process. So whether it was working, trying to help a salesperson meet their month-end goal by doing what we could to streamline, our process and reviews and helping to align legal resources to get that contract out the door for them. A lot of what I was doing in those other industries really kind of prepared me for feeling like, hospitality is the industry that was sort of the best fit for what, I was looking to accomplish with my career, as well as, with how my personality fit. And what I was doing at Hilton was a lot of bringing those kind of stakeholders together. I was ultimately had the opportunity to work with a lot of different groups within the organization, everything from digital marketing to guest assistants to global sales. And so I was in a position to where you could kind of look past silos and understand what was happening on one side or another. And I was doing that from the prospect of working on the legal side as part of that legal team and really helping to negotiate contracts and work through problems and help them to craft the right structure for commercial terms, as well as managing the resources from the attorneys in order to guide the legal risk. And so kind of that, everything kind of building up to that has really kind of put me in a unique position of kind of everything that we encounter and what we're building at Curator, as far as, looking at things from different lenses, understanding, who you're trying to solve for, who else is impacted or part of that process that you need to bring into the fold, and how you're ultimately going to reach that end goal based on whatever you're trying to accomplish.
What I heard a lot of was technology here, innovation there, but everything was about people and dialogue and communication. And that's what, people say a lot in our industry. Well, obviously it's an industry about people because we have patrons and guests and passengers. But what we always say, and maybe you too, Brent, is, it's actually entirely about people. It's entirely about communications and dialogues. And so are many other industries, but some industries are more finance. Yes, but it's more about numbers, or some it's more about pure results or scientific or et cetera. We all work, this whole global industry that all of us are in, and people within the gaming organization, yourself and other senior executives. This is a internally flowing world of information, experiences, and dialogue. And guest satisfaction is a term that we all wrap things up in. But really what it means is that there is an active, positive, healthy dialogue, that you are now one of the leaders of a hub of that, right? Whereas before you were facilitating and maybe building, and now you're like in the maelstrom of it all, navigating through and trying to maximize for your stakeholders and your guests. And that's the beauty of what we do. So I don't always interject this much in a pod, but I thought, where you are and what you guys are doing is really kind of like a wonderful snapshot of the essence of this industry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's all about, ultimately, how we're driving success within Curator is that we have to be positioned as that trusted advisor. We aren't going to have all the answers all the time, but we're going to, be there, as a partner to work towards, the common solution and find and really fit that need of what we're looking to accomplish.
Yeah, perfect.
And yeah, it speaks for itself. I mean, over 100 hotels in 3 years, and launching within those 3 years. We forget that the first year was during the pandemic year, which just adds the challenges. And I wanted to ask you about that, and I think this is a good point too, about what it was like to launch a new hospitality brand during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was, to say it was challenging, would be an understatement. At the time, even the committed hotels, within the Pebblebrook portfolio and some of our founding members were still closed or, trying to determine like how they're going to reopen. And so, you're kind of at a stage where you question, is this the right time? Is this what hotel needs? Ultimately, we sort of came to the realization that this was the best time to do it because they're going to need what they need is going to be greater than potentially, what they were doing pre-pandemic. So understanding, how they're going to come back online, how they're going to manage, that phased opening approach and and work through that staffing model problem and how technology and their tech stack and and potentially the partners they were working with were helping them to address the financial strain of what that was doing to their business, was really sort of the catapult into what was driving a lot of the early negotiations and vendor relationships that we ultimately brought into the program, to help to solve for that and to start to build that curator journey.
So you took a huge obstacle and turned it into an opportunity, is what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. I'll take your words. Yeah.
Brent, we're going to move on to the fourth and final question here. What problems would you advise entrepreneurs to focus on solving in order to quickly scale within the hotel industry?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's understanding your core value proposition. What are you trying to solve for? Knowing that, and I think also caring for it and balancing that with being flexible, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, it's worked in some cases where you're kind of positioned to be the disruptor. You're going to launch something that's brand new that no one's come across for, or if you're trying to solve for a particular problem that's already existing, making sure you sort of are open to listening and understanding and learning about that problem potentially could have sizable returns in what you're able to accomplish and in the time frame of building sort of the better trap within a shorter time frame.
I think that is a great point to end it on, the whole idea of building a better mousetrap, because there is so much we could dive into in terms of finding those specific problems. And there are numerous ones within the hotel industry that need strong technology providers to help solve. Michael, did you have any final questions?
Maybe just one question. Do you find your organization can take risks because of your state of where you're at versus, maybe it's a leading question, I don't know, Brent, but can you take more risks? Can you be more creative perhaps because of where you are right now in your growth?
Yeah, I think we can, and we look at that from two perspectives of how we kind of look to build out our program. We do a lot of pilots, to where if we want to prove something out, that's one of the another core value of Curator is that we want to understand what's next. We can be sort of out there, ahead of the curve, because ultimately we are dealing with independents, and independents can also be a little bit more nimble as far as what their appetite is for taking on and trialing new products. And so we kind of look to play matchmaker there a lot of times and trying to understand how we potentially can take a newer product or an innovative approach and incorporate that into a hotel environment that can be tested and vetted and ultimately proved out to where it becomes a larger rollout within the program.
Great answer.
Yeah, I think that's important for technology companies to know about in terms of the piloting, the pilot process, and going through and really working within companies such as Curator to then work towards a master service agreement. So it's very important to understand that staged approach to rolling everything out. So Brent, can't thank you enough for coming on. This has been a fantastic power half hour to really understand Curator, your role, and also some just great advice for any vendor to the industry and also other hotel brands looking to do what Curator does, or join Curator if you're an independent hotelier listening to this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation and enjoyed spending time with you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks for listening to the Gain Momentum podcast. To stay up to date, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Gain Advisors, head to gainadvisors.com.